Hi, my name's Claire. I work with MedBrief. I've been with MedBrief for a couple of years now. I'm a clinical supervisor within the clinical team. Today, our podcast is about AvMA, the helpline, and we're going to talk about the work of AvMA, the wonderful things they do. We're joined by Gill, who is our AvMA Helpline Manager. So, hi, Gill. Do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, Claire. So nice to meet you, and thank you for inviting me today. So I'm the helpline manager at AvMA. So my role is to recruit, train, and supervise our helpline volunteers, and I also advise on the line. I've been at AvMA for just over 35 years, so short time, but yes. So that's my role within AvMA.
So, Gill, can you tell us a bit about the helpline?
Yeah, so our helpline is there to give people preliminary advice about the options that are open to them. So it could be anyone that's feels that they've been affected by avoidable medical harm in healthcare. So we could provide advice to anyone in England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland. So it's national, the people that come to us.
So, when it comes to the calls themselves, can you tell us what type of calls that the helpline receives?
So it's a wide range of calls. You never know what you're going to get on the helpline. So it could be about a birth injury, a delay in diagnosis, a delay in treatment, something related to oncology. It could be dentistry, mental health, even cosmetic surgery, anything where it may be healthcare related that they may contact us. And also the calls, it could be something that happened yesterday or 20 years ago. So it's a real variety of things that come through on the helpline.
So, when it comes to like the calls themselves, what does that support look like in practice?
So in practice, when someone calls our helpline, we will invite them to tell us a bit about what's happened and why they're calling us today. And then from that, we'll look to see what they feel has gone wrong, because sometimes it's not obvious when they're speaking to you. So you're gently probing them, sort of finding out a bit more about sort of where it happened, when it happened, who it happened to, and what they feel has actually gone wrong, and what have they done about it so far, and what do they want to achieve. And then we will guide them through the different steps that they may be able to take. One of the other things is English may not be their first language, so that can be quite challenging when you're trying to get the information from them. I know at AvMA we tackle that in various ways. If there isn't a family member who can speak for them whilst on the call, we will arrange a call back from, it could be one of our helpline volunteers that speaks the language that's required, or we would use someone like Language Line, and we would call them back and do the interpretation that way. We also, not everyone can speak on the helpline, so it may be that they have a hearing impairment or something like that. I had a situation once where a lady couldn't speak on there, but she could lip read. So I did a Teams advice session with her, and so she could lip read. We also have people where visual impairments. So with the guides that we've spoken about, we can get them in a print version for them with the background that they require, so that they can read the guides. So there's various ways that we can accommodate if people can't speak on the helpline. So Claire, as a helpline and AvMA helpline volunteer, what can callers expect from you and from our other volunteers when they call the line?
I think looking back on the calls that I've had in the past year, one thing that is really important to callers is they've got a listening ear. I think it may be the first time that this person has spoken about what's happened to them or what they perceive the situation is. And a listening ear will be so, so important to them. I think a lot of them are looking for guidance and to unravel almost that ball of wool in their head that's a big knot. They've got this situation, they don't necessarily know what to do with it. What do they do next? What haven't they done that they need to do? What are some of the terms that they're going to come across in this whole process? They're looking for also a level of, obviously, professionalism, whether it's from your clinical or your legal background. You have to have that level of professionalism, I think, so it installs some confidence in them. So I think those are the main things for me that I think the caller is expecting. And also another thing is empathy. They may not have had any empathy about this situation that they've been in. So I suppose that goes a little bit with the listening ear, that you need to tell them that you understand. And, you know, that they may feel, some words I've heard is, I feel a bit crazy. Well, if you can say to them, I understand, I'm listening, you're not crazy, tell me what's happened. And I think that's the most important thing. That's the first thing, that when you pick up the phone, you have to gain that caller's trust and confidence that you are listening to them and you're not going to belittle what they've been through in any way.
It's hearing them, isn't it? It's hearing what they have to say. And as you say, so, you know, that's sometimes the first time anyone's ever done that and listened to them. But also I think about independence as well, because AvMA prides itself on its independence, and having you there as, you know, giving independent advice is so important.
So Gill, when the callers make that call, what advice can we provide to them? What can we do for them?
So we will offer them sort of practical advice about the steps that they may be able to take, and that may be we would explore with them, have they tried speaking to the clinicians or whoever it is that they feel that the harm has been, and if they have, or have they made a written complaint, for instance. So have they made an NHS written complaint, or private health, if it was relating to private healthcare, have they made a complaint there? Have they had a response from that complaint? If they haven't made a complaint, it may be that the volunteers will suggest questions that they may want to ask in that complaint. Or they may have already done that. They may have had a response. They're not happy with it. So the volunteers will, you know, maybe explore with them ways they may be able to go back and find out more information. Or it may be that they are looking to pursue a clinical negligence claim, and the volunteers will simply explain about what you need to show to be successful in a clinical negligence claim. So we try to avoid too much legal sort of jargon, but it's really to explain about, you know, the breach, the causation, the limitation, all things like that, to practical things that they may not know. And then it may be that the volunteer will suggest that the caller writes into AvMA, because we have a written service as well as the helpline. So we may suggest that they write in for more further advice, or we may signpost them to our AvMA accredited panel solicitors, if that's the route that the caller wants to go down. So Claire, based on your helpline sessions that you've had, what are the most common reasons people get in touch?
There are a number of reasons. Sometimes I get the impression some people just want to talk. They may not have had, in fact, any breach of duty or causation, anything happened to them, but they've just got this big ball of, I've been through this awful experience. I don't know if something has happened to me. Can you just listen to me? And then sometimes people are really focused on the fact something has happened to them and they want clarity and direction. So I have had instances that when someone has talked through their situation with me, we've talked about the legalities of the situation they've been in, they come to the conclusion that maybe something hasn't happened to them that can have a legal term put to it, where a case can be brought forward, but they have thanked me for listening. So you do get the impression that actually the call hasn't been in vain, that actually just they wanted someone to listen to them. And then equally, when you've clarified a situation and you've given someone the way forward, then it's become very clear that that's what they've needed. So I would say those two things. People will call to either talk through a situation or they're very focused and they want clarity on what to do next.
So, Claire, we know that working on the helpline, we hear some really awful things on the helpline, and it you know, it's you. I don't think you can ever say that it doesn't affect you in some way as being an advisor on there. And I know myself that you know, it's because you never know what you're going to get on the line, and people have different emotions. So you're getting people that are angry. They could be angry with you because, you know, you're the person they're talking to, and they sort of, you know, and you're listening, but they've got that anger there. And for you, when you come off the line, what's one of the things, because I think it's important that advisors look after themselves as well, volunteers, you know, they make sure that their well-being, and you know, there's various things that we do to support volunteers to help with that. But what are your tips as a helpline volunteer for that?
I think I've come from a background where I've supported people for many years clinically. My last clinical role was working within cancer services. So I suppose I've already been exposed to a range of different emotions, whether it be joy, sadness, anger. You know, you never really know in that type of work what you're going to get in one day. You know, your patients are at different stages, completely different journeys. Everyone is so individual. And I think a calm presence in the call for the benefit of your emotions and the caller's emotions is really important. You know, you can't be reactive in any way. Sometimes you'll have a caller that is angry about what's happened to them, and they're rightly so. You know, it's that can be very valid in some of the situations you've been in. So I think not reacting to that anger and kind of making them even more angry in that situation, and feeling a little bit frustrated, you know, even more frustrated than when they came on the call is really important. So I think you have to, for their mindset and for your mindset, keep very calm on the call, and just have that kind of listening, that openness to, I'm here, I'm listening. When I come off the call, we have a little bit of time, as you know, where we put ourselves on rests and we just write up what's basically happened on the call. And that is a really good time to kind of reflect on, what have I just heard? Because sometimes it can be quite distressing what has happened. Reassure yourself that you've done the best to help this person, and probably get yourself a cup of tea or coffee when you finish the call, and just sit there for a few minutes and kind of just sit with it, what's happened. It is our job, it is our role, and that calmness really helps. Just, you know, I think if you get to the point where you've got really upset and wound up about a call, then obviously you'd need to take a break. It hasn't happened to me, but sometimes I guess it can happen to people because people have different triggers. But I think my previous work has really got me into the mindset of being calm and being supportive rather than reactive. And I think that's really important when you work on a helpline like this.
Yeah. And being able to know that, you know, if you are sort of finding a call that's quite difficult, or after the call, you just want to speak about it, you want to talk to us about it, we're always here for volunteers to, just talk, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I have reached out to you before on one of the calls, but that there is that availability for us to talk with you when we're in the call if we're finding something difficult, because we've all got triggers in our life. Things have happened to us all. We've all got our own stories. So in that unpredictability, it's good to know we can reach out to you. We've got the chat function. You can hop in on the call if needed, if we're struggling. So I think it's really, it's really easy to just focus on the help, the mental well-being of the caller. But as a volunteer, it's really good that I know that if I start to struggle with a call and I'm triggered in any way, one of you would be there, it's really good to have.
No call's the same, and no caller is the same, obviously. And that some callers, some of the it's very the story is very easy to follow with some, and others aren't so easy to follow, and they're jumping around everywhere. But also that obviously there's different human emotions, and some people understandably are angry, and that is quite difficult, isn't it, on the helpline to deal with that, to be able to manage that emotion, but also to be able to provide advice that we're there to do. And other people are it's just very easy for them to just sort of, not easy, but it's the account is very clear. And so it's easier for us to be able to maybe direct them. But for people that are angry, how do you deal with those types of calls to be able to get the best out of those calls still?
Do you have to think on your feet almost? You pick up that call and you have no idea who is going to be on the end of that call. More often than not, it's somebody that has got a story to tell. And like I said before, it's that ball of wool in their head. It's all knotted up. And more often than not, I find that people almost jump straight into it and they just want to get everything out. And whether it comes out with anger or sadness or frustration, it's that need to tell their story. And I think one of the most important things to do is to get them to slow down. So I usually say to them, I need to make some notes. Just let me stop you there. Let's take a breath. I hear what you're saying. So let's make some sense of this. Let's walk through it together. And again, if someone's a bit angry, if you come to them and say that and basically say, I hear you, but let's slow this down and walk through it together. I found that works. If somebody is struggling and they're kind of just blurting everything out, I find that works. So I think at that point, when they've kind of initially said what they've got to say, take a breath and get them to take a breath with you and say, right, we are going to talk about this, but we're going to do it. We're going to slow it down and I'm going to make some notes and let's just take it easy. Just tell me what's happened. And that almost kind of, with some people, it will break the ice. If they've phoned up angry, and I think the most important thing to remember is they're not angry at you. It's not personal. They're not shouting at you as a person. They're shouting about what they feel has happened to them. And some of these stories can be absolutely horrific when you hear what's happened. They can be hugely traumatic. So I think whether they're angry or whether they're just frustrated or they're sad, take that time, reassure them that you are going to talk about this with them and offer them that listening ear, and then start to unravel that tangled ball of wool with them. And kind of, it becomes then a little bit of a journey. You are actually breaking it down into sentences, breaking it down into events, and it becomes very structured then, and you can almost hear that kind of unraveling happening when I'm maybe repeating back to them, okay, so this happened, and I can put it in one sentence, and then this happened. And I think that's the only way I can kind of describe what happens when you pick up that call and you've got somebody on there who wants to tell their story. You have to get it to a level where both of you can kind of talk and work through the process. And ultimately you are avoiding them getting angry again, but they might. And you can't always avoid people getting sad and upset, because sometimes telling that story will make them sad and upset. Yeah. So it's just maintaining that, like I said earlier, that listening ear and keeping it nice and calm and at a slower pace for them than maybe what's going on in their head.
They may be angry, they may be, there's no trust there. Why is this person going to listen to me when nobody else has? And, and then, so sometimes that will change. You can have somebody will call the helpline angry, and then sort of after about 5-10 minutes of them realising that actually you can trust us to listen to you, to hear you, it can change, can't it, throughout the call?
It really can. Sometimes somebody will remain angry, and as you've worked for AvMA for many years, so you'll agree there are the policies in place for dealing with anger that's directed at us. We just can't tolerate that, can we? It's something we can't have. But normally that anger does melt away once the conversation opens up and you say, I'm here, I understand you, I get you, talk to me. So you've been with AvMA for many years, and I guess you've seen the organisation grow. How important have volunteers been, and how do they remain important to AvMA?
Claire, I can't express how important our helpline volunteers are. Without them, we wouldn't be able to run this core service at all. We don't get any funding for the helpline. We wish we did, that would be lovely, but we don't. So we rely on volunteers to give up their time to support us and our beneficiaries. So they are a huge part of our organisation and the work that we do, and supporting people. And we know ourselves that we take about 2,500 calls a year on the helpline, and we know that we lose about the same amount every year, simply because we can't deal with the number of calls that we have coming through. We get so many. So at the moment we have about just under 110 helpline volunteers on the line, and we still need more to be able to manage the calls that come through to us.
I've seen that situation where I've been on a call, and from the computer screen that we have in front of us, we can see when calls are coming in, and we can see when we're not able to answer calls. So I completely get the what you've said about the figures of calls that are not getting answered. But I know the figure you said to me earlier, how many volunteers you need. How many actually is it?
Even, as I say, we've got about 110 volunteers. If we doubled that, we still wouldn't be able to take the 2,500 calls that we lose. Probably would need about 3 times, about 300 volunteers to actually be able to do that. Because our volunteers are, they're some of them work once a month, so they're not all on at the same time. But it's astounding that for every sort of 2.5 calls we take, we lose 2,500 as well. So we are always recruiting for volunteers, and we have volunteers that stay for a long time. I know you've been with us a year, and I've had volunteers that have been with us for 10 years, and they may do it once a month for sort of 10 years, and they've been with us such a long time. So we're very, very lucky to have volunteers that we retain. But at the same time, people move on, things to do with work and life. So yeah, we're always recruiting.
And that, I mean, again, I'm just amazed the funding situation. It must be so difficult for you, and that's why volunteers who can give their time are just so essential, because that funding that maybe should be there, it isn't there, is it? It makes it so difficult to give this vital service.
So we wouldn't be able to run that core service without them. And they are they provide people with a voice. The volunteers are there to give those people that contact us a voice.
Yeah.
And they may not have that. They may not get that opportunity to have that voice until they ring the AvMA Helpline and speak to the likes of you and our other volunteers. And that's why they are so important to the work that we do. And also the work that you collect, the information you collect from them. As you say, we complete a form for every call that we take. But that all feeds, all that information that you take, where these things are happening around the country, what's happening. It feeds into the larger work that we do at AvMA, which is the campaigning and the other work that we do. So it's not just about providing that advice. It is collectively what we are getting through the helpline that you're helping us with, that we do on a larger scale. So, Claire, what does a typical helpline shift look like to you?
First and foremost, before I start, I get a cuppa. That's really important. I have that on my desk, and I will obviously just mute everything else that's going on, and open up like the call software, because we have dedicated software that brings the calls into us. And then you're normally on with another person. Sometimes it can just be you. Again, that comes down to the volunteer situation, doesn't it? So the calls come in, and you pick the call up, you introduce yourself, and basically just talk the caller through the processes that we've talked about. So you kind of make a quick assessment of how is this caller. That's the most important thing. How are they in their mind? How do I need to respond to them? We have a database, obviously, on the AvMA website, which I have up on my laptop, which has got all the self-help guides. And we also have our contact form, which is open for me. And I usually use the form as a way of working through the call with the caller. So once I've established that rapport with them and that trust, and I understand where they're at in their head, whether they are angry or frustrated or sad, or just want to talk about it from a very neutral situation, I normally start by taking down from them, give me an account of what has happened. And like I say, do it in a step-by-step process, put their experiences into some sentences that we can have some structure. And then I would ask them typically where they are in this whole process. Have they made a complaint? Have they had any advice from solicitors already? And that kind of dictates then where the call goes. So, like I said, AvMA have got this wealth of self-help guides on the website, which I sometimes refer to. We can talk about things. Sometimes they'll want an understanding of the legal system. And this is more pertinent to if they obviously are looking to have some type of redress in the form of compensation. So we'll maybe talk about if they understand some of the legal terms like breach of duty, causation, limitation, to give them a feel of some of the terms they're going to maybe come across when they approach a solicitor. They can be quite daunting, meanings if a solicitor starts talking about breach of duty and they're like, oh, I don't understand what this is about. Sometimes they haven't made a complaint to the trust or the centre of care, so we can talk about the complaints process. We can talk about limitation, which is how long they've got in UK law, which can vary in different parts of the UK, how long they've got to bring that legal action against the centre of care if that's what they're going to do. It's also really important to say to them, look, if you're going down the legal route, if that's what you want to do, all you will achieve out of that is compensation. You won't necessarily get an apology, a change of practice. So then we could have a discussion about, if they're not looking for compensation, if they would like an apology or a change of practice, how they would communicate with trusts or centre of care for that to be in place. Because sometimes people are not looking purely for compensation. They're looking for that centre of care to maybe say, we hear you, we are sorry this has happened to you, we are looking at our practice. And sometimes that's enough for people.
Yeah.
So the conversation can go a number of different ways. It's as unique as the person that's calling on the phone, because everybody is so unique when they call.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had 2 calls that are the same. But you won't, will you? Because it's a person with a very individual situation. And then what we can do towards the end of the call, if they do need solicitors' information, we have a database with AvMA of accredited solicitors that we can dip into, and we can recommend them to them. We can recommend, like I said, some self-help guides, and we can send all this information in an email to the caller, which makes it hugely accessible for them. It means they can have a good read through all the information themselves, which is normally what I suggest, because these calls can be quite emotional. They're not always going to take everything in. So having the email is a really good thing. So at that point, we're getting towards what would be the end of the call. So we would look at sorting out the email, which we can send to the caller, and we can attach things like the accredited solicitors, the AvMA self-help guides. And I think it's a really good thing to have, the email, because during that call, so much has been discussed. There's been a lot of emotion normally, and people are not always able to take in everything you've said to them. So I think the fact we've got that email function is really good, and it makes it accessible for a lot of people to read back over. And I normally finish by just saying, look, has the call been helpful today? Have I been able to answer your questions? Is there anything else that you want to say? And I think, obviously, I've probably been really lucky, but people have said most of the time, in fact, all of the time, you've been helpful. This service has really helped me today. And that is hugely satisfying, to know that you've started the call with somebody who could be very upset, angry, frustrated, and you've come to a point where they feel they've talked about what's happened and they're getting some help, which at the end of the day, that's what AvMA wants to do, isn't it? It wants to help people. So normally we do finish the calls on a good note, and I'll then take a bit of time to just finish the contact form, just recap what I've written on the form, what advice I've had, and a couple of moments, a few minutes, just to maybe just, get everything reset in my brain, because I could then go on to have another call in my session. So just take a few moments for myself, have a few sips of my coffee, bring up a new form and take a few minutes, and then put myself back on available. So that's kind of how a shift will kind of go. I mentioned earlier, Gill, that I think I'm quite fortunate because the clinical background that I've come from, my last clinical role was oncology. So I've maybe learned to have that calm manner that maybe adapts to the person I'm talking to. During the years of your experience, what kind of backgrounds do you think are helpful for volunteers to have in this role?
So the volunteers that we have on our helpline have, they've either got legal backgrounds, so it could be a qualified solicitor, legal executive, barrister, paralegal, trainee solicitor, or with a clinical background, such as a doctor, nurse, midwife, or people that have worked in complaints, so perhaps worked for PALS, or governance. We've also got volunteers, one's a speech therapist, so it can be very varied. And I think that's what's so brilliant about the helpline. It's enriched with all of that knowledge and experience that each of you all bring, and it's all complemented, there being so many of you on the line.
I know you've talked a bit about people's backgrounds. Drawing on my own, I've come from a background where I've worked in the medical legal sector since 2010. So bearing in mind the backgrounds that people seem to have within the role, who can apply to become a volunteer?
It would be a solicitor, qualified solicitor that we're looking for, a legal executive, a barrister, paralegal, trainee solicitor, and usually firms, we're very lucky, a lot of our panel firms will put forward staff of those, paralegals, maybe to get experience on the taking calls, but also people with clinical backgrounds who may want to get into law, for instance, or they've just got an interest in clinical negligence. And I think it would be very difficult to actually advise on the line if you haven't got those backgrounds, those experiences. But again, you can have all the experience in the world. The most important thing is that you're good with people. And I think that if you're good with people, then that's one of the key things that we are looking for.
So if people are interested, how do they go about applying? What are the steps they can take to kind of get involved?
So the first thing is, I'd say, go on to our volunteering page on our website. There is information there about what's involved with volunteering, and then there's an application form to complete. People are welcome to contact me before completing the application form if they want to talk it over first. But I'd say complete an application form. I'd then review that, and then we usually have like group applicant meetings, which is really nice actually, because I'll have sort of a maximum of about 5 new applicants together. So you could have a doctor, you could have a paralegal, or a nurse advisor. You could have all various people all in that one room on Teams, talking about why they want to volunteer and their experience and their backgrounds. And then I would explain to them, obviously, what's involved in volunteering and the commitment. And then from then on, we would then look at the training side of it. Or the sessions, obviously, that they're going to be doing.
What amazed me as well was the training. I felt really supported with your training. I mean, you can probably give a bit more information about that.
Yeah, so the training is in 2 parts. And the first part is independent study. We have 7 mock recordings of calls that we ask you to listen to, and these calls were done by staff and volunteers. Which they absolutely loved, because they could act. One would be the caller, the other one would be the advisor. So it's great. So the volunteers can keep those, because they're not like real callers. But we try to do with the calls various things. So there might be a delay in diagnosing call. There could be one on a mental health call. Again, you may get a call where somebody is angry, and just listening to see how that volunteer has managed that call, somebody who's upset. So there are 7 mock recordings of calls that the volunteers listen to. And then there is our self-help guides. There's a lot of self-help guides that we have. And also the advice that we provide, we've talked a lot about, in England, but we also give advice to people in Scotland and Ireland, Wales, and there is those differences in the complaints process, the inquests, the legal side and the time limits with the legal aspects of claims. So our volunteers are expected to know those things, so they have about 3 to 4 weeks of independent study, reading through all the information. And then the second half of it is that the volunteer will take a live call with permission of the caller under our supervision, and it's all done remotely because, as I say, all our volunteers work remotely. And then we would listen to them taking the call. We're there to jump in if they need support, and to guide them. And it's only until the volunteer and the trainer feels happy that they can staff it independently. They will then staff it independently. But we're always there on support, even when you are doing it independently.
I think one thing I'd like to really know, Gill, is, and I think this is probably one of the satisfying parts of my job, your job, when you get positive feedback, and I'm hoping you get positive feedback from callers. How is that for you? Because you've worked for AvMA for so long, and you've obviously been very focused on the goals of AvMA. How does it feel when you get some positive feedback from a caller?
Oh, Claire, we get some wonderful feedback from our callers, and as you know yourself, like when you're on the call, as long as somebody isn't too upset, if you feel that it's okay to ask them to feedback about whether they found you helpful or not today, we ask them to complete a survey. And they can do that in a couple of ways. We can send them an email survey, or there's a keypad survey after the call. And it's really to feedback about the call experience, really, with you, because we can't control what will happen after that call, whether they won't, after all the advice that you give them, whether they'll get the answers that they need, or that solicitors will take their case on. That's sort of out of our hands. But it's the experience of when they've spoken to you today, and the feedback we get is testament in itself to the commitment of our volunteers and how well that they communicate to our callers. And when we get the feedback, we share that with you. So we will email you. It's all anonymized, the feedback that you've got from the call, and the kind words from the callers. And then also, if they're on LinkedIn, we do kudos on LinkedIn. So big shout out to Claire at MedBrief or any of our volunteers, and little quotes of what the client has said and how you've helped them. And that's just brilliant, because that's great for everyone. That's great for us as a charity. It's great for you personally and the organisation that you work for. So we always feedback all the positive feedback. And if there is any negative feedback, which isn't very often, but if there is, I will go back, listen to the recordings. If I think there's training needs to be met with the volunteer, I'll talk to the volunteer about it, about maybe how that call could have gone differently. But I'm pleased to say that most of it is positive feedback, and everything gets fed back to our trustees, our board of trustees. And we share that, patient, their experience, client experience when they call the helpline. We will share that in various sort of newsletters and things like that. So trying to get the word out really of why they should, come to the helpline.
So thinking about people that might be listening to this, if someone's thinking about volunteering or they want to reach out for some support, what would you like them to know?
So if you are thinking about volunteering for the helpline, please do take a look at our volunteering part of the website. But if you're not sure, just contact me. We can have a chat about what's involved. And if you think that that this is something that you'd be really interested in, that you've got the time commitment to volunteer, and you just want to help people, and you want to use your existing skills to support the charity, then please do contact us, and we would love to have you, because we do need more volunteers.
It's making me think about when I first heard about AvMA, when this opportunity came up last year. And at that point, I was really missing like that clinical contact. I've been qualified since 1997, and I heard about it, and it really ticked boxes for me to get back to that helpful and caring side of my profession. So it's what you said is making me think, because I think I would say that if anyone is yearning to get some contact with people back in a caring and helpful fashion, then it really does kind of tick those boxes, and it is so satisfying and such a great learning curve. But also, I'm thinking about people that might need support. What would you say?
Anyone that feels that they need that support, to just reach out to us. Just, pick up the phone. We're here to listen. We're here to guide you, advise you on your next steps. It takes a lot of courage sometimes just to pick up that phone and make that first call. But I hope that, once they start speaking to the volunteer, that it begins to feel easier. Somebody's listening, and that's what we're there for. But yeah, just reach out if you can, when you're ready.
So after hearing everything we've said today, Gill, I think we can both agree that it's absolutely been a conversation that needed to be had. There's been lots of information. So I'd just like to say a big thank you for coming in and talking to us. It's been fantastic.
Oh, thanks, Claire. Thank you for all the support that you give us. We couldn't do it without you and our other volunteers. So thank you.